In a room full of federal agents in Washington, D.C., the DEA applauded General Manuel Noriega. That exact same month, $2 billion in Medellín Cartel money was flowing through Panamanian banks. Noriega was taking a $1 million cut every 30 days to guard a cocaine pipeline flooding Miami, Houston, and Los Angeles. To understand why the DEA handed a commendation to the man they were supposed to destroy, you have to look at the map. Panama is a country built around a ditch. The canal is the most strategically valuable 50-mile corridor on the planet. Whoever controls Panama's military apparatus controls access between two oceans and two continents. The CIA needed a native officer willing to feed them intelligence on leftist movements spreading south from Cuba. They found Manuel Noriega. He was 22, ruthless, and understood early on that information is a more durable currency than loyalty. He priced himself accordingly, eventually landing on the agency's payroll for $100,000 a year. The CIA had Noriega on its payroll since 1967. DEA agents built airtight cases against him for decades and were ordered to stand down for 23 years. To understand how an asset became a dictator, we have to examine the ledger that made his protection a calculated decision. By the early 1980s, the Medellín Cartel had a geography problem. U.S. Coast Guard and DEA surveillance were flooding the Florida Straits, compressing the Caribbean corridors that had moved Colombian cocaine north for years. The cartel needed new infrastructure. Noriega offered them a sovereign country. For up to $200,000 per flight, he granted safe passage through Panamanian airspace. He went a step further, deploying his own soldiers to provide security for a massive cocaine processing facility built in the Darien jungle, right near the Colombian border. The arrangement included a highly efficient financial tier. This data visualization tracks the cash flow. Money laundering through Panama's national banking system ran at a flat 2% commission. Within 18 months, Panamanian banks were processing an estimated $2 billion in cartel funds annually. The CIA station in Panama City knew about the Darien lab. They filed accurate reports describing the entire operation. But because Noriega sat at the intersection of every classified cable flowing through Panama, delivering dossiers on leftist organizers across Latin America, the reports went nowhere. The calculation held. The cost of maintaining Noriega eventually escalated from drug running to domestic terror. Hugo Spadafora was a Panamanian physician who could not be bought. By 1985, he had assembled detailed testimony from cartel insiders, complete with account numbers and airstrip coordinates, tying Noriega directly to the trade. Spadafora announced publicly that he intended to present his evidence. Instead, on September 13th, he was pulled off an intercity bus by men in civilian clothes. He was tortured, decapitated, and his body was found stuffed inside a U.S. mail sack near the Costa Rican border. The U.S. State Department received a full report on the murder. No sanctions followed. No diplomatic communications were downgraded. In Washington, Spadafora was processed as an acceptable externality. The calculation held. Noriega's domestic terror was ignored, but his legal immunity inside the United States rested on a separate operation entirely. In 1984, Congress passed the Boland Amendment, strictly prohibiting U.S. intelligence funds from supporting anti-Sandinista rebels in Nicaragua. The Reagan administration treated this as an engineering problem and sought a shadow infrastructure. Panama became the hidden architecture of the Contras supply chain. Noriega was the perfect sovereign cutout. As this logic model shows, cargo flights routing guns south used the exact same Panamanian jungle airstrips that Noriega was simultaneously leasing to the Medellín Cartel to move cocaine north. One infrastructure, two illegal cargo streams, one man collecting the fees. That year, CIA Director William Casey flew to Panama City for a secret meeting. Casey had read the station reports. He knew about the Darien lab, the intelligence leaks, and the severed head in the mail sack. Noriega knew that Casey knew all of it. The two men were locked in mutually assured deniability. Casey couldn't dismantle Noriega without dismantling the Contra supply chain, which would lead Congress straight to the receipts and trigger cabinet-level criminal exposure. So Casey shook hands with a murderer, and the operation continued. Years of diplomatic insulation convinced Noriega he was invincible. In 1989, he openly nullified the Panamanian presidential election. When opposition candidate Guillermo Endara won by an overwhelming margin, Noriega sent his paramilitary forces into the streets of Panama City to beat Endara and his running mates with iron rods. Then, the violence crossed the Canal Zone perimeter. On December 16, 1989, Panamanian soldiers opened fire on a U.S. checkpoint, killing Marine First Lieutenant Robert Paz. That gunshot finally inverted the geopolitical ledger. After 23 years of continuous protection, the domestic and political cost of keeping Noriega in power now officially exceeded the value of his intelligence. The resulting invasion, Operation Just Cause, deployed 27,000 U.S. troops against a defense force of fewer than 16,000 men. The military strategy was rapid compression, but the underlying logic was evidence management. A defiant fugitive Noriega could sell 20 years of American covert operations to Havana or Bogota. They had to silence the asset they built. To capture him, U.S. AC-130 gunships opened fire on Noriega's headquarters with 105mm howitzers. The compound was surrounded by dense wooden tenements. The civilian neighborhood of El Chorrillo burned to the ground. Hundreds of bodies emerged from the rubble over the following weeks. The residents of El Chorrillo did not authorize the CIA to protect Noriega or the NSC to run supply chains through his airstrips. They simply lived where 3 separate institutions decided to build an empire. When those institutions decided to close the ledger, the people on the ground paid the final price in ash.